Crescent Pines annual block party. 40 neighbors. Folding tables, red and white tablecloths, somebody's brisket smell coming from 3 houses down. I'm sitting in my rocking chair on the front porch. The chair has been here 11 years. Brad comes out. He looks at the chair, looks at the neighbors across the street, looks at me. Mom, move it. Right now. I don't move. Courtney appears behind him. White sundress. That look she gets. The one realtors use when they find a cracked foundation. Oh, we're just doing some updates out here. Mom has such a vintage sensibility. A few people turned. Someone laughed politely. Brad leaned down. Close. You are embarrassing us in front of the entire community. This is a Class A neighborhood. Either the chair goes or you move to the guest cottage and stay off the front-facing property. I mean it, Mom. I looked at him, then at Courtney, then at 40 neighbors pretending to fix their plates. I touched the armrest. The wood was warm. I've been sitting here since 8 in the morning. You're right, Brad. Order must be absolute. My name is Dorothy Hargrove. I spent 22 years as a circuit court judge in the state of Florida. I've read HOA covenants the way other people read menus, fast and with a clear sense of what will kill you. The Crescent Pines HOA governing documents run 304 pages. I'd read them that morning, twice. Brad handed me a rocking chair as a problem. I was about to hand it back to him as a weapon. His first fine would arrive on Friday for the lawn. I went back inside. Through the front window, I could see Courtney walking the length of the porch. She had her phone out. She stopped at the rocking chair, tilted her head, took a photo. Then another one. She typed something. I knew what she was typing. She'd been doing this for 4 months, photographing the house, posting it, tagging it #Crescent Pines, #intentional living, #curated home. The rocking chair had appeared in exactly none of those photos. Brad was on his phone by the driveway. I couldn't hear him through the glass, but I could read the posture. Weight forward, one hand cutting the air. That was his managing a situation posture. I'd watched him develop it over 44 years. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. While it brewed, I thought about 304 pages. I thought about Section 4, Article 12, lawn color specifications, Pantone coded, updated 2021. I thought about Section 7, Subsection C, front-facing vehicle parking, 72-hour maximum without committee registration. I thought about Section 11, the one about conduct detrimental to community standards, which was broad enough to park a truck in. I poured my coffee. Then I thought about 4 months ago when Courtney had taken Ray's photograph off the mantle. Ray had been dead for 9 years. The photo was from 1987, our trip to Asheville, him squinting into the sun with that ridiculous fishing hat he refused to throw away. It had been on that mantle for 9 years. Dorothy, I'm doing a little refresh in here. The tones are reading a bit warm, and this frame is really pulling the eye away from the architectural feature. The architectural feature was a gas fireplace Brad had installed 6 months after we moved in together. Ray never saw it. I'd put the photo in my bedroom. Didn't say anything. I thought about February, when Brad had shown me a brochure. Pelican Bay Senior Living, Sarasota, where comfort meets community. Full-color photos of white-haired women doing chair yoga by a pool. It's just something to think about, Mom. You'd have people your own age around. Activities. I'd folded the brochure and handed it back. I have activities. I thought about Courtney's friend Melissa, who'd come for dinner in March and asked about the bird feeder on the porch railing. Is that some kind of bird-rat feeder? Courtney had laughed. A real laugh, not a polite one. I'd refilled Melissa's wine glass and said nothing. I drank my coffee standing at the kitchen counter. Outside, the block party was still going. Someone had set up a speaker. A child shrieked with laughter somewhere down the street. I rinsed my cup, dried it, put it back. Then I went to my room and got the yellow legal pad. I had some notes to organize. Thursday came around the way it always did, slowly and then all at once. I drove to Rita's house at 2 in the afternoon. The Garden and Ash Club had been meeting on Thursdays for 11 years, longer than I'd lived in Crescent Pines. We'd started as an actual gardening club. Rita had this notion we'd all grow heirloom tomatoes and trade cuttings. But somewhere around year 3, it had evolved into something more honest. We still talked about plants. We talked about a lot of things. Rita Kowalski met me at the door with a gin and tonic and a look. "You brought the document." I was carrying the HOA covenant binder under my arm, 304 pages, tabbed with 6 colors. "I brought a document." "Dorothy, that's the Bible, and you know it. Come in before the neighbors see you with it." Nancy Fitch was already in the living room, sitting in the good chair by the window the way she always did, positioned to see both the door and the street without appearing to watch either. Nancy had spent 30 years as a family court mediator, and she'd never fully turned it off. She saw things. She just usually didn't say them out loud until the moment they'd do the most good. Gloria Oduya arrived 4 minutes later. She'd taught high school history for 26 years before becoming principal. Then, the kind of retired person who still gets called when the school board does something catastrophically stupid. She knew everyone in a 40-mile radius, and they all owed her something, though she'd never frame it that way. Patty Drummond came last, slightly breathless, carrying lemon bars she'd clearly made that morning. Patty had been a pharmaceutical sales rep for 30 years and approached every social situation like she was closing a deal. Warm, relentless, always knowing what you needed before you asked. We settled. Rita put on more gin and tonics. Nancy looked at the binder. "How many times did you read it?" "Twice." "Before or after the block party?" "Before." Nancy nodded, like this answered a question she hadn't asked yet. I told them what had happened, not emotionally, just the facts, the sequence, the exact words. I've found that exact words matter more than feelings. Feelings change depending on the day. Words are what they are. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Patty spoke first. "Dorothy, honey, how are you doing?" "I'm fine, Patty." "Because what Brad told you, essentially that you couldn't sit on your own porch. It's his porch, technically. His name is on the deed. It is not his porch. That was Gloria." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Rita was reading the binder. She'd pulled it across the coffee table and opened it to one of my yellow tabs. Section 7, subsection C, front-facing vehicle parking, 72-hour maximum. She looked up. "Didn't you say Courtney's Lexus has been at the curb since Sunday?" "Since Saturday, actually. 7 days." Rita looked at Nancy. Nancy was looking out the window. "It's such a beautiful car. I'd hate for something to happen to it." "Now, we're not going to do anything hasty," said Patty, though she was smiling. "We're going to be thoughtful, strategic. We're going to be absolutely within the rules," said Rita. "Isn't that right, Dorothy? Order must be absolute." Gloria picked up a lemon bar. "I happen to know Carol Beasley over at the property management company. She processes all the HOA violation notices. We were in the same book club 6 years ago. Very thorough woman." Nobody said anything for a moment. "How's her garden?" asked Nancy. "Gorgeous. I'll have to send her some of my black crim tomato seeds," as a gesture of goodwill. We talked for another 2 hours, about tomatoes mostly, and roses, and the particular challenges of Florida soil in the dry season, and how it was such a shame when perfectly good things got damaged due to preventable neglect of clearly established guidelines. When I left, I had 2 pages of notes and a Tupperware of lemon bars. I drove home the long way, past the front of the house. Courtney's Lexus sat at the curb, gleaming white in the late afternoon sun. 7 days. I went inside and wrote the first formal complaint. The violation notice for the Lexus went out on Monday morning. $300, due within 30 days, per Section 7C, front-facing vehicle parking exceeding the 72-hour limit. I had submitted it through the official HOA online portal, which took 11 minutes because the portal was designed by someone who apparently hated both computers and people. Carol Beasley's office processed it by Tuesday afternoon. Courtney called me Wednesday at 9:17 in the morning. I know the time because I was on the porch with my coffee and the Cardinal was on the feeder, and I looked at my watch when the phone rang because I was curious whether she'd make it to Wednesday or crack sooner. Wednesday was later than I'd expected. "Dorothy, hi! So I just got this notice in the mail, and I think there might be some kind of mistake." "Oh?" "It says our car was in violation of some parking thing? But we park there all the time. Everyone parks in front of their house. I don't understand." Section 7, subsection C, 72-hour maximum for any vehicle at the front-facing curb without a committee registration form. Your Lexus was there for 7 days. The math works out to $300, though I want you to know I only submitted for the 1 violation period, not each individual day, which would have been considerably more. Silence. Did you file that?" "I'm a resident of Crescent Pines, Courtney. I have the same right to file compliance reports as anyone else. You said so yourself. Order must be absolute." Another silence, longer this time. "I'll talk to Brad." "You do that, honey. Give him my love." She hung up. The Cardinal flew away and came back. I finished my coffee. Brad called that evening. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I let that go too. On the 3rd call, I picked up. "Mom, what is going on?" "I'm not sure what you mean." "The fine, the parking fine. Courtney got a violation notice." "Courtney's car was at the curb for 7 days, Brad. Section 7, subsection C is very clear. I didn't write the rules." "You filed a complaint against your own family." "I filed a compliance report against a vehicle that was in violation of community standards. The vehicle belongs to Courtney. I don't see how those 2 things are in conflict." "Mom!" "You told me order must be absolute, sweetheart. I'm just taking your advice." He was quiet for a long moment. "This is about the chair." "What chair?" He hung up. I went back to the legal pad. The lawn complaint was already filed. Section 4, Article 12, Lawn Color Specification Emerald 7B. Brad's lawn service had installed sod that read clearly as Emerald 7 under the Pantone matching system, a discrepancy of approximately 2% in saturation. I had documented it with photographs taken in natural morning light, which per the HOA guidelines was the standard for color assessment. $500. The lawn company Brad used, Green Horizon Landscaping, very popular in Crescent Pines, 12 clients on our street alone, had apparently never been informed about the Pantone specifications. This was not my problem. This was, however, an interesting piece of information. I wrote it down. The thing about 304 pages is that most people, when they move into a community with an HOA, do not read them. They skim the summary sheet, the one-pager with the big bullets about fence heights and paint colors and mailbox styles, and they sign and they think they're done. They are not done. The summary sheet is a highlights reel. The actual document is a complete legal framework with enforcement mechanisms, appeal procedures, fee schedules, committee powers, and approximately 47 sections that nobody has thought about since the original developer's lawyer drafted them in 2003. Some of those sections are extremely interesting. Section 19, for instance, covered exterior lighting. Not just the type and wattage, the angle. Fixtures had to be angled downward, toward the property, to prevent light spillage onto adjacent lots. Brad and Courtney had installed new sconce lights in February. They were angled at roughly 45 degrees, outward. Section 23 covered holiday decorations. They were permitted between November 15th and January 10th. It was currently August. The small ceramic pumpkins Courtney had put on the porch steps were not holiday decorations per se, but they were seasonal decor. And Section 23A defined seasonal decor as any item displayed with primary reference to a calendar season or holiday, which Courtney's Instagram caption had helpfully confirmed. Getting a little fall ready over here, #fall aesthetic. I noted Section 23A. Section 31 was the interesting one. It covered what the document called residential commercial activity, any business conducted from or associated with a Crescent Pines property that generated income and was visible or discoverable to the community. Courtney's Instagram account had 8,000 followers and featured the Crescent Pines address in her profile. She ran what she called brand partnerships. 3 of her recent posts had included paid promotional tags: a home goods company, an organic cleaning products line, a furniture brand. Section 31 required disclosure and committee approval for any such activity. I had a feeling Courtney had not submitted the form. I noted Section 31. I closed the binder and made dinner. Chicken and rice, nothing complicated. I ate at the kitchen table with Ray's photograph. I'd moved it back from the bedroom, propped up against the sugar bowl where I could see it. You'd have something to say about all this. He would have. He'd have thought it was funny, probably. Ray had a gift for finding the absurdity in things without letting it make him mean. I was working on that. I washed my dishes and went to bed. Dave Murphy called me on a Thursday morning, which told me he'd been sitting on it for a few days before deciding to pick up the phone. Dave was the kind of man who liked to think he was acting on his own terms, even when he was clearly reacting. "Mrs. Hargrove, Dave Murphy, I think we need to talk." "Good morning, Dave. How's the garden?" "Fine. Listen, I've been getting some calls about the compliance reports." "Is there a problem with the reports?" "The problem is the volume. We've processed more compliance reports in the last 2 weeks than we usually get in a quarter, and they're all coming from your address, and they're all about the same property." "I've been thorough." "Yeah, I noticed." A pause. "I need you to come in. My place, Saturday, 10 o'clock. We need to have a conversation about how this committee operates." I said I'd be there. Dave Murphy's house was the largest on Ridgecrest Court. 4 bedrooms, 3-car garage, screened lanai that took up most of the backyard. He'd built it himself, or close enough, back when he was still running Murphy Construction. The front was immaculate, professionally landscaped, pristine concrete driveway, American flag on a regulation height pole. I arrived at 10 o'clock sharp and rang the bell. Dave answered the door in khaki shorts and a polo shirt. He was a big man, gone somewhat soft in retirement, but still carrying the impression of someone who'd spent decades on job sites. He had the handshake of a man who thought handshakes meant something. "Mrs. Hargrove, come in." The living room was comfortable and slightly oversized, furniture bought to fill space rather than to fit it. A wall of family photos, grandchildren mostly, a mounted sailfish over the fireplace. On the coffee table, a manila folder. He sat across from me, opened the folder. "You filed 9 compliance reports in 14 days. 5 against the property at 44 Ridgecrest Court, which is where your son and daughter-in-law live, and where I understand you also reside." "I'm a guest in that home. I don't reside there in any formal sense." "Right." He looked at the folder. Lawn color, vehicle parking, exterior lighting angle, seasonal decor outside of permitted window, undisclosed residential commercial activity. He looked up. "That last one's a stretch, Mrs. Hargrove. Section 31 is quite clear, Dave. Any income-generating activity associated with the property and visible to the community requires disclosure and committee approval. Courtney's Instagram account is monetized and lists the Crescent Pines address. She's got 8,000 followers. It's not exactly a corporation. The section doesn't specify a follower threshold." Dave leaned back. He looked at me with the expression of a man reassessing a situation he thought he'd walked into with the upper hand. "What are you trying to do here, Mrs. Hargrove? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a personal dispute that's being run through my committee." "From where I'm sitting, Dave, it looks like a community with a governing document that hasn't been consistently enforced. I'm simply helping correct that." "By targeting your son's house." "By filing accurate reports on documented violations. If those violations happen to be concentrated at one address, that's a matter of that address's compliance record, not my filing behavior." He was quiet for a moment. He picked up his coffee mug and set it down without drinking from it. "You know what the problem is with people who actually read the whole document?" "Tell me." "They find things." He reached into the folder and pulled out a second sheet, slid it across the coffee table toward me. "Things like the flagpole in my front yard being 1 inch over the maximum permitted height per Section 8-D. Or my garage doors being painted coastal gray, which is not on the approved palette for the 2021 update. Or my drainage configuration on the east side of the property being non-compliant with the 2019 Stormwater Addendum." I looked at the sheet. He'd written it up himself. His own violations, his own citations. I looked up. "You read it too." "I read the parts that were relevant after you sent me the highlights." He held my gaze. "I've been running this HOA for 11 years. I know where the bodies are buried because I buried most of them. What I don't know is what you actually want." I considered that. "A seat on the compliance committee." Dave stared at me. "That committee has 3 members and they all golf together. Then it'll have 4 members, and I don't golf." He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a lawnmower started up somewhere down the street. Son of a bitch. He picked up his coffee and actually drank it this time. "Fine. Monthly meetings, second Tuesday. Robert Page and Herb Antonelli are the other 2. Robert's fine. Herb's going to hate this. You write your own reports, you process them through Carol's office, same as everyone else, and you don't use committee resources for anything personal." "Of course not." "And this is Hargrove. Dorothy. Dorothy." He looked at me steadily. "I run a tight ship. Always have. You want to be on this committee, you play it straight. You don't go after anyone who doesn't have it coming. Dave, I spent 22 years on the circuit court bench. I only go after people who have it coming. He almost smiled. Almost. Second Tuesday, 7 p.m. Bring the binder. The Garden and Ash Club met the following Thursday at Nancy's house, which had the advantage of being positioned at the corner of Ridgecrest and Palmetto. Excellent sightlines in two directions. I told them about Dave Murphy. Rita set down her gin and tonic. You're on the compliance committee. As of the second Tuesday. Dorothy Hargrove is on the Crescent Pines compliance committee. She looked at Gloria. I feel like we should mark this date somehow. I'll put it in the club minutes, said Gloria, under new business. What does this mean practically, said Patty, for the situation? It means I have standing to initiate inspections, not just file reports as a resident, but formally request property assessments as a committee member. It also means I have access to the full violation history for every property in Crescent Pines going back to when the HOA was formed. The room was quiet for a moment. That's a lot of history, said Nancy. 11 years. And Brad and Courtney have been here how long? 4 years. Nancy nodded, said nothing else. She didn't need to. Has Courtney paid the parking fine? Asked Rita. Not yet. And the lawn? Brad called Green Horizon. They're replacing the sod. Should be done by next week. I paused. Green Horizon serves 12 properties on this street. Several of them may have the same color specification issue. Gloria looked up from her notebook. I'm sure they'd want to know about that, as a courtesy. I was thinking the same thing. Patty was quiet for a moment. She had that look she sometimes got, the one where she was calculating something and deciding whether to say it. Dorothy, can I ask you something? Of course. What's the end of this? Like, what does it look like when it's over? I thought about that. I looked at the window. Nancy's bird feeder was just visible from where I was sitting. She had 2 cardinals, a pair, and they were both there right now. I want my chair back on my porch. That's it? I want to sit on the porch of the house where I live, in the chair that belonged to my husband, and feed the birds and not be told that I am an aesthetic problem to be managed. I paused. And I want Brad and Courtney to understand that the people they've decided to manage have options. Nobody said anything for a moment. Well, said Rita, in that case, I think we should have another gin and tonic. We stayed 2 more hours. We talked about the black crim tomatoes and whether the weather had been too wet this fall, and Gloria's concerns about the new traffic pattern on Palmetto since the construction started. Regular Thursday things. When I left, Nancy walked me to my car. She's going to push back, you know, Courtney. This isn't going to stay quiet. I know. She's building something, that Instagram account. She needs the house to be a certain thing. You're a variable she can't control. And people like that, they don't tolerate variables. I know that too. Nancy looked at me. Are you ready for it to get uglier before it gets better? I thought about the rocking chair, about Ray's photograph on the mantel, and then off it, and then in the bedroom, about the Pelican Bay brochure, about bird rat feeder set in my kitchen to a guest at my table. Nancy, I was a circuit court judge for 22 years. My standard for ugly is considerably higher than theirs. She patted my arm once and went back inside. It got uglier. Courtney's Instagram had been building toward something. I could see it in retrospect, the way the posts were angling. Loving our Crescent Pines community, but navigating some challenges in our home environment right now. More soon. 74 comments. Stay strong. And sending love. And HOs are the worst. Solidarity. The post she put up on a Wednesday, 12 days after my committee appointment, was more specific. Something I've been sitting with. What do you do when someone in your own family weaponizes bureaucracy against you? When the rules, which exist to protect the whole community, get twisted into a personal vendetta? I won't go into details, but I want to be honest. This has been one of the hardest seasons. Not going anywhere. This is our home and we love it. But I'd be lying if I said some people in our lives haven't shown us exactly who they are lately. 412 comments. I read it on my phone, on the porch, with my coffee, in the rocking chair. Well, shit. I put the phone down and watched the Cardinal for a while. Then I opened the HOA portal and pulled up Section 11. Conduct detrimental to community standards was defined in Section 11B as any public statement, digital or otherwise, that misrepresents the nature or operation of the Crescent Pines HOA or its authorized representatives, or that brings the community into public disrepute. Courtney's post didn't name the HOA directly, but it named the community by tag. Hashtag Crescent Pines appeared in the post. And it characterized HOA enforcement activity as a personal vendetta, which was a misrepresentation of the nature and operation of the committee's authorized functions. Section 11C, fine of $1,000 and formal written warning, reviewable by the full committee. I noted it. I didn't file it yet. I wanted the committee meeting first. Brad came to my room that night. He knocked, which he didn't always do. I said, "Come in," and he did, and he stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, looking like he was 12 years old and had broken something. "Mom, can we talk?" "Sit down, Brad." He sat on the edge of the chair by the window, Ray's reading chair, the one I'd refused to let Courtney redecorate. He looked at his hands. Courtney's post. I saw it. She was upset. She didn't mean to. She meant every word, Brad. She's very deliberate about what she posts. That's what makes it a business. He was quiet. The fines are adding up. The lawn alone was $500, and they're coming back next week to redo it, so there'll be a service fee on top of that. And the parking fine, $300, yes. And you're on the committee now, which means I have standing to initiate inspections. Yes. Mom, he looked up. What do you want? I looked at my son. I'd looked at him for 44 years. I knew the 47 different ways he held his face when he was avoiding something. Right now, he was doing the one that meant he knew he'd done something wrong, but was hoping I'd let him off without having to say it out loud. I want my chair on the porch. That's all? I want my chair on the porch. I want Ray's photograph on the mantle where it's been for 9 years. I want to feed the birds without Courtney's friends making remarks in my kitchen. And I want you to understand, really understand, Brad, that I have been in this house for 2 years, and in those 2 years, I have been managed, redirected, and repositioned by degrees, and I am done being repositioned. He was quiet for a long time. Courtney she has a vision for the house. I know she does. She's not trying to push you out. I let that sit for a moment. Brad, she showed you the Pelican Bay brochure before you showed it to me. He didn't answer. That was the answer. Good night, sweetheart. He stood up, stood there another moment. I'm sorry, Mom. I don't know what I'm doing. I know. Get some sleep. He left. I sat in the dark for a while. Then I got the legal pad and looked at my notes for the committee meeting. The second Tuesday arrived. The compliance committee met in Dave Murphy's dining room. Robert Page was a retired insurance adjuster, 63, careful and precise in the way of someone who'd spent decades assigning values to damage. Herb Antonelli was 71, former middle school vice principal, and had been on the committee since year one. He looked at me like I was a substitute teacher who'd shown up claiming to be the new permanent hire. "I wasn't informed there was a new appointment," said Herb, looking at Dave. "Now you are," said Dave. We got through the regular business first. 3 pending reports, a driveway crack complaint that had been in the queue since spring, a fence permit renewal. Standard. I watched how Robert and Herb operated. Robert was methodical, rule-driven. Herb was political. He knew who the complainants were and quietly weighted his recommendations accordingly. I noted that too. When we got to the compliance reports filed in the past 30 days, 9 of them, all from me, Herb put on his reading glasses and looked at the stack like it had personally offended him. 9 reports in 30 days from one resident. From one committee member now, technically. These are all targeting the same address. These are documenting violations at the same address. The address happens to have a higher than average rate of non-compliance. The address where you live, where I'm a guest, correct. Herb looked at Dave. "Dave, you see the problem here." "I see 9 documented violations with photographic evidence and code citations. You want to tell me which ones are wrong?" Herb picked up the top report, read it, looked at the photograph. I'd printed them in color, labeled, cross-referenced. "The lawn color thing is 412, Article 12, Pantone Emerald 7B. The sod is Emerald 7. I checked it myself." Herb looked at Robert. Robert shrugged. "The documentation is complete, Herb. I don't see a procedural objection." Herb put the report down. "Fine. What's the last one? Section 11? Section 11B and 11C. A public digital statement that characterizes HOA enforcement activity as a personal vendetta and tags the Crescent Pines community. The statement was made by the same property owner currently accumulating violations." Herb read it. His expression didn't change much, but something shifted behind his eyes. "The post doesn't name the HOA. It tags the community. Section 11B includes digital statements that bring the community into public disrepute, regardless of whether the HOA is named specifically. The tag makes the connection explicit. $1,000 fine for an Instagram post. Per the schedule in Section 11C, yes, along with a formal written warning. This is going to be contested." "Of course it is. That's what the appeals process is for. Section 19A through 19D, very clearly laid out." Herb took his glasses off. "Mrs. Hargrove, I've been on this committee for 11 years. What you're doing here is applying the governing document consistently and without prejudice to all residents, including those at the property where I happen to be staying." I looked at him. "Herb, would you prefer I recuse myself from reports involving that address?" He stopped, because we both understood what that meant. If I recused myself from those 9 reports, they'd have to be processed by the remaining 2 members. And Robert was clearly going to apply them by the book, which meant Herb would have to vote against the book, on record, to block them. "No," he put his glasses back on. "I prefer you apply the rules equally to everyone. That's all I've ever done." Dave Murphy, who had been quiet for most of this, poured himself more coffee and said nothing. But when he caught my eye across the table, something passed between us that wasn't quite a smile. All 9 reports were approved, violations upheld, fines issued. I drove home at 8:45 and sat on the porch for a while in the dark. The neighborhood was quiet. Someone's wind chimes down the block, a car going by slowly, someone looking for an address. The chair was warm from the day's heat, the wood settling the way old wood does. I put my hands on the armrests and felt the grain under my palms. Courtney's appeal arrived 3 days later. It was, I'll give her this, well written. She'd used a template. I could see the structure of it, but she'd customized it intelligently. She argued that the Instagram post was personal expression protected under the First Amendment, that the HOA governing document could not constitutionally restrict resident speech, and that the fine was retaliatory in nature given the personal relationship between the reporting party and the property owner. The First Amendment argument was wrong. HOA governing documents are private contracts, not government action, and courts have consistently held that the First Amendment doesn't apply. But it was the kind of wrong that sounds right if you don't know the law. The retaliation argument was more interesting. I wrote the committee's response myself. Dave reviewed it, Robert signed off, Herb read it twice, then signed. The response was 4 pages. It cited 14 precedents, 3 of which were my own decisions from the circuit court. It was, I thought, quite good. Courtney's appeal was denied. She did not post about that. Green Horizon Landscaping replaced the sod at 44 Ridgecrest Court on a Thursday, which meant I could watch from the window. It took 4 men most of the morning. The new sod was, I was satisfied to note, clearly Emerald 7B. You could see the difference if you knew what to look for. The lawn bill was, according to what Gloria had heard from her contact at the property management company, just over $2,000, including the replacement and the service call and the HOA fine. The following week, Brad's car, the Camry he'd had for 6 years, nothing flashy, the one thing about Brad that had stayed sensible, developed a parking situation of its own. He'd started parking on the street on the far side of the house, which was technically the back-facing side and therefore not subject to Section 7C. It was, objectively, fine. He was learning to read the rules. I found that oddly touching. Courtney was less adaptive. The terracotta planters she'd put on the porch steps, seasonal decor, Section 23A, outside the permitted window, she replaced with white concrete ones. White concrete was listed in the approved exterior decor palette, technically compliant. She'd read the palette. I gave her credit for that. The sconce lights were still at 45 degrees, though. Either she hadn't read Section 19 or she was betting I wouldn't push it. I noted it on the legal pad. I wasn't ready to use it yet. A good judge knows when to hold evidence. The Thursday Club met at Gloria's in November. There was a particular quality to Thursday afternoons at Gloria's. She had a screened porch facing the back garden, and the light at that time of year came through the live oak at the perfect angle. We'd been meeting there for so long that the chairs had worn comfortable spots, and everybody had a default seat without ever having discussed it. I told them about the appeals process, about the committee meeting, about Herb Antonelli's face when he realized I'd backed him into a corner. "I've met Herb," said Rita. "He coached my nephew's Little League. The man cannot tolerate losing a procedural argument. You probably gave him a week of insomnia." "He'll recover," said Nancy. "What about Brad?" asked Patty. "How are things at home?" "Quiet. He's parking on the other side of the house." Patty made a face that meant something. "Dorothy, are you okay with all of it?" When my kids were small, Brad and his sister Karen, they used to test the rules constantly. Every kid does. And Ray and I had to decide, every time, whether we'd hold the line or let it go. And the thing about letting it go repeatedly is that it doesn't teach them the line moved. It teaches them the line isn't real. But he's not 8 anymore. No, he's 44. And he's been letting Courtney reposition me for 2 years. And every time I didn't say anything, it taught them both that I could be repositioned. I paused. I'm done teaching that lesson. The room was quiet. Well, said Rita, in that case, let's talk about what happens next. What happened next, we all agreed, was the annual Crescent Pines HOA meeting. First Saturday in December, all residents invited, committee business presented, new business accepted from the floor. In 11 years, the annual meeting had been, by all accounts, extremely boring. This year was going to be different. 3 days before the annual meeting, Courtney and Brad filed a formal complaint with the HOA against me. I'll say this for them. They were efficient. The complaint was 22 pages. It had exhibits. It accused me of using my committee position for personal retaliation, of creating a hostile living environment, of targeting their property in violation of my stated duty of impartiality, and of conduct detrimental to the community in my capacity as a committee member. They'd hired a lawyer. His name was Tyler Wentworth, and he was 29 years old based on the bar registration date I looked up. And he'd written a very ambitious document that cited the Fair Housing Act, which didn't apply here, and the Florida Homeowner Bill of Rights, which applied somewhat, and several HOA cases from 2019 that were interesting but distinguishable. Tyler Wentworth had worked very hard on those 22 pages. I called Dave Murphy. I saw it. What do you want to do? What I want to do and what the process requires are going to be the same thing, which is present it at the annual meeting and let the residents weigh in. That's how contested committee actions work per Section 23 of the procedural addendum. I know. Dorothy, are you ready for this to be public? Dave, I've been ready since the block party. He was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I pulled the full violation history on 44 Ridgecrest. Your reports aren't the first ones on that property. There were 2 prior resident complaints in 2022, noise complaint at 11 p.m., and a dispute with a neighbor about water runoff from the backyard. Both documented, both just sitting there. Who filed the water runoff complaint? Paul Jennings, 48 Ridgecrest. It's been pending since March. You might want to call Paul before Saturday. A pause. Already did. The annual Crescent Pines HOA meeting was held in the community clubhouse at 10 a.m. on the first Saturday in December. The clubhouse had capacity for 60, and approximately 53 residents showed up, which was the highest attendance in 11 years, according to Dave, who looked out at the room with an expression that mixed satisfaction and mild alarm. Courtney was in the 3rd row, and she had her phone out from the moment she sat down. Brad was next to her, in a blazer which he never wore on weekends. The blazer was doing a lot of work trying to project confidence. Tyler Wentworth sat in the back, also with his phone out, also in a blazer, younger blazer. The Garden and Ash Club was in the 2nd row. Rita had brought coffee in a thermos. Nancy had a notebook. Gloria knew at least 12 people in the room by name and had greeted all of them on the way in. Patty had brought lemon bars, which she'd distributed before the meeting started, which meant that by the time the room settled, approximately 1/3 of the residents were eating Patty's lemon bars and feeling warmly toward whoever had provided them. Patty had been in sales for 30 years. She knew what she was doing. Dave called the meeting to order. We went through the regular business, financial report, maintenance updates, the pool resurfacing that was 18 months overdue and now had a contractor and a timeline. People asked questions, Dave answered them. Robert Page presented the violation statistics for the year, which were significantly higher than any prior year for reasons that several people in the room were already aware of. Then Dave said, "We have a contested matter to address. A formal complaint has been filed against a compliance committee member. Per Section 23 of the procedural addendum, contested committee matters are reviewed at the annual meeting with input from the community. The complainants will present, the respondent will respond, and the community will have an opportunity to speak. Questions?" Nobody had questions. "Go ahead," said Dave to Brad. Brad stood up. He'd prepared something. I could see the note card in his hand. He talked about the pattern of complaints, the concentration at a single address, the personal nature of the relationship. He was measured and reasonable and clearly trying very hard. When he got to the retaliation argument, his voice got slightly too controlled in the way that meant he was keeping something tamped down. He sat down. Tyler Wentworth made a brief statement about procedural concerns and due process. Dave looked at me. I stood up. I didn't have note cards. "I want to start with a number, 9. That's how many compliance reports I filed in the first 30 days of my committee appointment. All 9 documented violations at the same address, my son and daughter-in-law's property at 44 Ridgecrest Court, where I currently reside as a guest." I paused. "The complaint before you argues that those 9 reports constitute personal retaliation and an abuse of my position. I want to address that directly." I put a folder on the table in front of me. Exhibit 1, Section 4, Article 12. Lawn color specification, Emerald 7B. The sod installed at 44 Ridgecrest was Emerald 7. Documented with photographs in natural morning light per the standard. The same specification issue, I should note, has been found at 4 other properties on this street using the same landscaping company. Those reports are in the queue. Someone in the room made a sound. A few people shifted. Exhibit 2, Section 7, Subsection C, Vehicle Parking. Documented with date-stamped photographs covering 7 consecutive days. The section is unambiguous. I went through the 9 reports, each one, exhibit, citation, documentation. It took 11 minutes. By the time I reached Report 9, the Instagram post, the room was very quiet. Regarding the Section 11B finding, the argument that this constitutes suppression of personal expression is incorrect. HOA governing documents are private contracts. Courts have consistently held that the First Amendment does not apply to private contractual relationships between homeowners and voluntary associations. This is settled law. Tyler can correct me if I've missed a relevant case. Tyler Wentworth, in the back, did not correct me. The argument that my reports are retaliatory assumes that the violations are not real. I would submit that if the violations are real, and the documentation supports that they are, then the question of motive is irrelevant. The rules apply equally. That's what makes them rules. I picked up the second folder. Now, there's one more thing I'd like to put before this community, and it isn't about my son's property. It's about this one. I put the violation history on the table. This is the 11-year violation history for 44 Ridgecrest Court, pulled from the HOA's own records. My 9 reports are highlighted in yellow. The 2 prior reports, filed by other residents in 2022, are highlighted in blue. The blue ones were never processed. The room stirred. There's a water runoff complaint filed in March of this year. A resident at 48 Ridgecrest documented that drainage from the backyard at 44 was consistently flooding onto his property following heavy rain. That complaint was still pending as of last week. Paul Jennings, 48 Ridgecrest, raised his hand from the fourth row. That's my complaint. 8 months. That fence corner floods every time it rains more than an inch. I've got photos going back to April. Dave Murphy said, "The committee acknowledges that complaint is overdue for processing, Paul. We'll address it directly after this session." Paul put his hand down, but he didn't look satisfied. He looked like a man who'd been waiting 8 months. I raise this not to pile on, but because it's relevant to the argument before you today. The complaint is that I have targeted one property unfairly. What the record shows is that one property has had a consistent pattern of non-compliance, some of which was documented before I arrived, some of which I documented, and all of which is supported by evidence. I looked at Brad. My son is a good person who has made some choices I disagree with. This proceeding has nothing to do with that. It has to do with whether the governing rules of this community apply to everyone the same way. I sat down. The room was quiet for a moment. Then a woman in the fifth row, I didn't know her name, but I recognized the house, 2 streets over. She had the beautiful bougainvillea, raised her hand. "Can I ask something? The lawn color thing. I use Green Horizon too. Are you saying my lawn might be the wrong color?" We're doing a community-wide assessment of that specification. You'll receive notice if there's a finding. Another hand. A man in the back I recognized from the mailbox cluster on Saturdays. "I have a question about the water runoff situation, because that's not just 44. I've seen that whole end of Ridgecrest drain badly. Is this a systemic infrastructure issue that the HOA should be addressing at the community level, or are we treating it as an individual property violation?" Dave fielded that one. And then the meeting was, somehow, not about Brad and Courtney's complaint against me anymore. It was about the pool resurfacing and the drainage on Ridgecrest, and whether the Green Horizon situation was going to turn into a community-wide remediation project, and how many properties were potentially affected. Tyler Wentworth sat in the back and said very little. Brad's blazer was doing less and less work as the morning went on. The complaint against me was tabled for committee review, which meant Dave, Robert, and Herb would review it, which meant it was effectively done, because I knew Robert would apply the book, and Herb had already committed to that position and wasn't going to reverse himself in writing. The meeting ended at 12:40. Rita found me on the way out. 11 minutes for 9 exhibits, I counted. I had 22 pages of material to respond to. Tyler Wentworth is going to need a stronger recommendation letter from law school. Outside, Courtney was talking to Brad in a low voice near their car. She saw me come out. For a moment, we looked at each other across the parking lot. She looked away first. Patty called me that evening. "Dorothy, I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear it in the spirit in which I mean it." "Go ahead, Patty." "I think you won today. I think you genuinely, completely won. And I also think that it costs something, even when you're right, even when the other person genuinely had it coming." I was quiet for a moment. "I know that." "Does Brad know you know that?" I thought about the conversation in the bedroom, his face. "I'm sorry, Mom. I think I don't know what I'm doing." "I think so. Maybe." "Okay." A pause. "The lemon bars went over well." They always do, Patty. I know. A beat. Good night, Dorothy. Good night. The week after the meeting, a for sale sign appeared in front of 46 Ridgecrest. Not Brad's house, the one next door, the Hendersons who'd been talking about downsizing for 2 years. Nothing to do with any of this. But the sign sat there, and Courtney drove past it on her way home one afternoon, and I watched from the porch as she slowed, looked at it, and then looked at our house. I was in the rocking chair. She saw me. She pulled into the driveway and went inside without stopping. Brad came out about 20 minutes later. He stood at the top of the porch steps, didn't look at me directly for a moment, looked at the street, the way he used to as a kid when he was figuring out how to start something. The committee dismissed the complaint. Robert sent us a letter. I know. The Section 31 thing, the Instagram commercial activity, they're going to require disclosure and retroactive approval. There's a form. I know. Courtney's looking at the numbers on staying here, whether it makes sense. I looked at him. And what do you think? He was quiet for a long time. Down the street, somebody was raking leaves. The sound carried. I think I spent 2 years letting her make this house something that doesn't feel like home. And I didn't notice what that was doing. To you or to... He stopped. Ray's photo is back on the mantel. I saw. Courtney moved it back 3 days ago. She didn't say anything about it. She just... It's there. I thought about that. Okay. Is that enough, Mom? Is that... I don't know what enough looks like. I looked at the yard, the bird feeder. The cardinal wasn't there right now, but it would come back. It always did. Regular as a commute. I'm not looking for a surrender, Brad. I'm looking for a household where I'm a person in it, not a variable to be managed. I paused. I think you understand that now. I do. His voice came out rougher than he intended. I should have understood it sooner. You're understanding it now. That's something. He stood there another moment, then he went back inside. I stayed on the porch until the cardinal came back. It landed on the feeder, looked around with that suspicious bird look they all have, and started eating. The chair creaked under me. Old wood. 11 years on this porch. I got the legal pad from the side table. Section 19. The sconce lights at 45 degrees. The thing about good evidence is knowing when you still need it and when you don't. I thought about it for a while. Then I closed the legal pad and put it away. The cardinal ate. The neighborhood settled into afternoon. Somewhere, a lawnmower. Somewhere, a child. The chair rocked, slow and even, the way things should go.